Today's conversation is with Ciara Feely, who's going to give us some great insights into how to get onto the buyer's side of the selling table.
Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson.
My guest today is Ciara Feely. Ciara's work involves transforming sales teams into trusted advisors. She's sharpening their listening skills, their communication, and empathy. She shares a message of how sales strategy and brave moves can transform companies' lives and culture. She believes in the power of connection and cultivating partnerships instead of transactional relationships. Music to my ears. She says this is the future of sales. She lives in a tiny village in Cork in the south of Ireland with her husband and twin boys, and we'll talk more about all of that later. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Tom.
So tell me a little bit about your journey to becoming a sales expert, and what are your connections with the event industry?
Well, my connections start in IHG in downtown San Francisco, and probably I learned some of my best mindsets and culture there through working with various different people. But the hospitality industry is in me to a certain degree. My dad has always worked for himself, and so I was always involved in meeting with customers. He would bring me on sales calls from the age of 10. So I always had that affinity and realized that there was just something different about, how you spoke with and how you were with clients. But my first memory of going to America, so I did all my education in Ireland and got the Donnelly visa, and I as part of my medical exam, I had to arrive in New York with an x-ray of my chest that was like this size, the x-ray that is, and I had to walk through immigration like that. So I was really excited arriving in New York. I landed a job working with Emirati Puris Lintos in advertising, started working in HR there, and had the opportunity to work on an event, and I got the bug there. A year later, I hopped in a convertible, drove to San Francisco with four of my best friends from Ireland, and I ended up working in with IHG. So that started my sales journey on the hospitality side, working the business travel market and the events market. So from there, I went in numerous different directions, but ended up back in Ireland and founded a venue finding agency. And that really helped me to develop what I call the third eye, which is the client's perspective. So that ability to really step back and look at your business from the client's perspective. And I only developed that when I was on the buying side, and I could see the different mistakes that I had made when I was in sales. Even though I was very good at sales, I could see then how better I could have been if I had that third eye.
So what is the third eye seeing? What did that young Ciara learn that she wished she had known?
Well, I realized that I was really trained to sell from the hotel's perspective, or from what I was selling. And the client buys and thinks in a very different way. So it really was that ability to just step back and see and hear and immerse myself into their world, which was hard to do when I was in sales, because you're selling a product or a service that you feel very passionately about, and you want to tell people about it, and you feel that it's the right solution for them. But the client isn't there yet. The client isn't at that conclusion. So it's up to you to really take the perspective of the client, to slow down. I think a lot of sales people really need to just slow down and pause and think, okay, well, what's the value here for the client? Why should they give you their time? Because it's precious to everybody. So you really have to earn that time and earn the conversation.
So this is what I call meeting the buyer where they are. And you talk about the buyer's journey. So where are they in that journey? And most buyers are not there for a transaction, but most of us were selling something, so we have a transaction in mind. So what do you lead with? You lead with the transaction. And I know you have a lot of experience coaching sales representatives out of transactional thinking, moving them over to the buyer side thinking. Tell me a little bit how do you start that? How do we help make salespeople more aware of what's happening on the other side of the table?
Yeah, well, I start in really immersing them into the client's world. So giving them that safe space in which they can do some thinking, and thinking like you probably don't do on a normal day-to-day basis, because everybody's really busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might have 5 leads that you have to get back to the client with.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I feel the transactional side has really creeped into the business, because you receive a lead and you just end up sending a quote. And so taking that step back takes a little bit of extra time, but generally, usually, the conversion rate skyrockets once you do that. So how do you earn the client's time? Well, number one, you have to stand out and you have to sound different. So how are you going to give value to that client? How are you going to ensure that it is a good use of their time? Because
Mm-hmm.
they are just as busy. They are perhaps in transaction mode themselves. They just got a lead and they were told to send it out and get plenty of quotes and all of that. So how can you do something different? How can you really show the client that it's going to be worth their time to invest 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that might be. So it's having that toolkit that's going to help you to be able to adapt to the different scenarios that you're finding yourself in.
So this buyer's journey, how do you determine me as a seller, how do I determine where the buyer is in their journey? I've just met them at a party or they've reached out to me. Are there framing questions? I mean, we all struggle with listening skills, right? You think salespeople would be good at listening, but we're not. We're good at telling. How am I going to find out what their journey is?
Yeah, well, a great way to do. The quickest way is to ask.
Okay.
I would just say, where, let's say, are you in terms of how urgent this is for you? Some people are just at the information gathering stage and they're curious. And now a lot of that tends to be done online. So having your
Mm-hmm.
right online presence is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
But how you really can determine it is number one, ask. And sometimes it's great to ask that in a safe space, when there isn't necessarily a lead on the table. So the more proactive I feel you are, the better it is. So a client, an event occurs and is created because of a need. So there's a need in a business.
Okay.
So something has changed in their marketplace, perhaps, and they're finding the need to do something different. Their circumstances have changed, and they go into ideate and research mode. And then let's
Mm-hmm.
say they decide that an event is a solution that they've come up with to help them to, maybe they need to grow market share. Maybe they need to
Mm-hmm.
stop the bleed of people leaving their organization. Maybe they realize they don't have strong enough connection with their clients, whatever that might be. So they decide that's a problem. An event is going to be part of a solution. They come up with people within the organization that are going to help organize this event. Who's going to own it? Whose budget is it going to come out of, right? And then they can send out they come up with the framework for the event, then they send it out to particular
Mm-hmm.
buyers, or to sellers, right, to the vendor community. And then you're stuck in quite a compressed buying cycle, because they've already done 3 or 4 stages. They've already been thinking about this for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Now it might be urgent that they need to get, find out, who's going to be the best person for them to work with, what are the ideas, all of
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. How's the money going to land, all of that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And so you are stuck in this kind of compressed, urgent
Hmm.
sales mode. So the more that you can enter the conversation back at step one, when they're realizing something is changing, the more you can develop the relationships there so that when they have their RFP created, they think, oh, straight away, I'm going to go to Tom. I've
Hmm.
had conversations with Tom.
Right.
He thinks strategically. He helped me to think this
Hmm.
through. And when you're in that solution mode with them before the urgent need is there, the better that is. Now, that's a concept that I've learned from Amy Infante from the GitGo group, and her team prospect all day long for people in the event and
Hmm.
hospitality industry. But it really fits very, very well in terms of what I teach, because that step of being able to have that strategic
Hmm.
conversation with the client, to earn that conversation in the first place, that's a really key part to be able to get right, in order to make sure that you're not just a number on
Hmm.
the lead list,
Right.
right? Maybe they're working with
Right.
an agency that they're going to say, look, I need to make sure that
Hmm.
you get an RFP from Tom, or
Hmm.
that send it to you directly, and you are all of a sudden at the top of the pile instead of transactionally at the bottom of it.
Okay. So one of the things that I see, my clientele do to create leads, because they don't necessarily have a lot of personal outreach. Business development doesn't doesn't actually get used in 90% of the businesses that you and I coach. But they have a form on their website that says, ask us about your event, tell us about your event. And they ask you for your name and your email and your event dates and what you think you need for that event, which sounds like a horrible starting point for somebody who's just gathering information. So if for some reason somebody comes in with that and I launch with, tell me more about what your event needs and what they're really doing, information gathering, asking about event needs is the wrong question. Regardless of how the lead came to you, you saying ask them where they are on their buying journey. What's the next question? Tell me about these open-ended questions, these killer questions that you use to help the potential buyer spill where they are, share enough information that you guys can work with each other and help each other move through this process.
Absolutely. So I think the very first thing that we need to do in that scenario with a client is to ask their permission to ask some questions, rather than launching into a load of questions. And you have to be genuine.
Mm.
I really want to make sure that I can help you to produce this. I really want to
Mhm.
make sure that I am giving you the right solution, but I have a number of questions. It's important to me that I understand the event more. Can I go ahead and ask you those questions? And then you have the client almost sitting back a little bit. They know what to expect, and they're like, yes, 99.9%, you're going to get a yes to that. And then what that does is that gives you control of the conversation.
Mhm.
We've talked about being transactional in sales, and that's what happens when you're doing what I call the dates, rates, and space. Tell me, when is it for? How many people? What is the setup? That's transactional, and that's what they're hearing from everybody. So if you want to stand out, you have to be skilled, or you have to be able to lead your team to have a different kind of conversation. And
Mhm.
let's be frank here. A lot of the time, the client may not have clarity. They, as we said, were just given this and told, get me a quote, and so they perhaps have not thought it all through. They haven't taken that space. So the more that you can help them to slow down, perhaps a little bit, and ask really great questions, the better, the more value you will be to them. So questions such as, you can warm them up with, tell me a little bit more about the event. What's important to you to make sure that you deliver. How do you want people to feel when they're in the room? I think that's a
Mm,
really important one for AV companies to be asking, because that will help you design the lighting, the atmosphere, the kind of technology, the
mhm,
visual, the impact that they need to have from the minute they walk into the room. So those kind of questions. I have a list of 50 questions, but you'd never ask them 50 questions.
mhm,
Um, and that helps them to just start thinking, yeah, this is important. I really need to think this through. And you're starting to get and build a different type of relationship with the client, because they
mhm,
perhaps they haven't had this conversation with somebody else. And you are of more value to them because you are helping them to think this through. You are helping them to even think like their stakeholders. Perhaps they're not the end client, which
mhm,
happens a lot in this industry. And you're just, okay, well, what would be important to them? What do they need to get from us? How do you need to make them look? Right?
mhm,
That type of thing. And just really being curious. I think salespeople really need to be naturally a little bit curious
mhm,
in this industry. And that's interesting. Why is that important to you? Tell me a little bit more about that. And that's what helps you to
mhm.
more value to the client.
In in one of these early or in this early conversation, this initial discovery, learning about each other, you're asking some great questions, and the buyer says, "Well, I've been asked to get a quote. Can you give me a quote?" Can we differentiate between the response to that and the response to, I need you to submit a proposal? Is there a difference for these meeting event planner buyers between a quote and a proposal?
Well, sometimes some transactions are transactional because they're
Right,
just looking for a microphone and a screen, right? So you're
right.
not going to invest 3 hours in that, right? You just make sure that you
Mm,
deliver that well, and then afterwards, if they're really in a rush, you go back to them afterwards and you try and develop that
mm,
relationship. But the questioning style, in terms of really being able to differentiate yourself, is what's going to be important. It's not rushing into the budget too
mm,
quickly. You
mhm,
want to make sure that you're sending them the right solution. I want to make sure that I'm making the right suggestions to you. So that's why I have a few questions that'll help me to make sure I'm not wasting your time,
mhm,
and I'm
mm,
going to send you what it is you really, really need. I feel you always need to position it as to how it's of value to them. I don't want to waste your time. That's why I have a few questions that'll help me get to
mm,
X, quicker, for the client. And that I feel helps, once they see the value in it. Nobody
mm,
wants their time to be wasted.
mhm.
And and that approach usually works.
Nice, thank you. I find that, in for AV companies, I know I put on events and I have an event planner and we go to venues and we generally start off with, seeing if the venue actually has the space that we need.
Yeah.
And you get some quotes. They say, here's how we typically do an event like yours. Here's the range of food and beverage per person that you might plan for. Here's the general rental fees for these spaces. And here's some of the other capabilities and things that we offer. I consider that kind of the quoting phase because it helps me better frame my ask, because my ask at this venue is going to be different than my ask at another venue. And for AV companies, I think we need to understand that the buyer doesn't know what kind of AV company you are yet unless they do. So quoting is helping them understand what kind of AV company you are so that we can better get to the point where we can talk about what a proposal would look like. Because many of the sellers that you and I deal with are waiting for an RFP.
Yeah.
Where's the request? I want to see that detailed thing so I can punch in my transaction items and put a discount on it and give you a price and put a pretty proposal around it. But that's a transactional process, which is not always called for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if it's just, microphones and stuff like that that you're selling, why can't you have that on your website? So they
Mm,
can be self-sufficient and get
mm,
whatever it is that they want to first. But when you're involved in designing something, when
mm,
there is a big difference in
mm,
how the client is going to feel as a result of the work that you've done as a
Hmm.
result of the high-end lighting
Right.
as opposed to a cheap spotlight, you know?
Right.
And the more you can educate a client on that. So if they say, oh, it's for an award ceremony, we want 2 spotlights on the stage, and we're just going to do it the same as last year. The more you can help them to ask and say, well, tell me about the award ceremony. How do you want people to feel? Um, you know, um, a lot of award ceremonies can turn out to be there's 20 people going up getting an award, and the atmosphere is just dead by the
Hmm.
time of the
Right.
person, just like this. But dynamic lighting and that high-end lighting can have a massive impact along with sound and
Hmm.
affecting people's senses, touching,
Hmm.
going into all the sensory, creating that sensory experience. So the more perhaps it is that you need to educate the client that that's what they really want. Nobody wants to do the most boring event ever and have people walk out. They want people walking out saying, this was amazing. I have to come back to it next year. I have to make sure that we're winning those awards next year. I have to make sure that I'm bringing, 5 more members of my team to this next year.
Hmm.
And that is the difference in being able to carve out these conversations where the client can see the difference between a transaction and just
Hmm.
selling me a light
Right.
versus what that light can really do for me and for my event.
Right. So, explain to them the what. Don't spend so much time on the how.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's how
Nobody.
better off they're going to be after they've
Right.
done business with
Right.
you know, because events can damage reputations, or
Hmm.
they can enhance reputations.
Right.
They can damage brands, or they can really grow a brand. And everybody wants their reputation to be enhanced and their brand to grow, and that's the difference that you can make. I think, and I feel very passionately that a lot of people in this industry undervalue the impact of their work, and
Hmm.
they're selling themselves. They have a really big role to play in helping that end client
Hmm.
achieve what they need to achieve from running that event. And that usually has a big contribution to the bottom line when you think about they want to grow their sales. They want to have much stronger business relationships. They want to ensure that the salespeople are thrilled and delighted to be working for this company and will want to work and sell even more next year. They want to make sure that they're positioned as market leaders. There's loads of different strategies behind
Hmm.
it. And the more you can understand that, the more you can help them to achieve that and advise
Hmm.
them. Well, I heard you say you wanted to achieve X, then that's why I'm suggesting Y. And that is a very different relationship. That's a partnership relationship as opposed to a supplier relationship where they're
Hmm.
haggling with you over the cost of a microphone and the drapes or whatever, whatever that might be. And that I feel is what this industry, that's where the opportunity is. That's where you're creating a connection. And
Hmm.
that is the future of sales. That can transform profitability in a company. That can transform your relationship with clients and make sure that profitable events are being held and that you're growing your reputation and your connection with clients and ultimately theirs with their clients usually.
Thank you. I want all my listeners right now just to rewind the podcast 1 minute and listen to what Ciara said again, because she just gave us the formula for how to start a transactional buyer on the journey to being a relationship buyer, how to get them out of their transactional mindset. And either they're going to convert or they won't. But if you can't get them to start making that transition, all you're going to do is exchange money and you're not going to have ongoing business. You're not going to have a trusted relationship. We're not going to get the kind of business most of us are looking for. I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. Thank you for that.
And that's something that we can control is our mindset towards it. You're not just selling a microphone and a lighting system. There's so much more. It's the impact of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran a workshop for both buyers and their event partners. I hate that word suppliers and vendors, but that's what
Yeah,
a lot of the
yeah,
industry is referred to as.
yeah.
But I ran a workshop for them on the impact of their work, and I really helped them to step back and think, what is it that they actually do? What is the result of their work? And I was really surprised. The buyers came up to me and said, "You know what? Thank you, Ciara. Thank you for helping me to get out of my RFP head."
Mm,
That they are stuck in that, "Oh, I need to send this out and I have to get all these boxes ticked and fill in the price for this and that." And they're not giving themselves enough credit for how their work impacts the people who attend these events and the companies or the organizations that are involved in creating them and paying for them. And last week I had a conversation with a sales leader, and she said she attended a sales call with one of her sales managers. And when her sales manager asked about the budget, the buyer said, "Oh,
mm,
I hate when I'm asked about that question," you know?
yeah,
And the sales leader was a little bit frustrated because she said, "We have to find out. We have to know whether this is a good client, a fit for us, all the
right,
rest." And I shared that when I was on the buying side, it was a question that frustrated me also, usually because it was asked too early. It might have been the third or the fourth question. And I understand that you need to know who you're speaking with and, if you're giving your time to the right person, but be careful not to filter people out too quickly and to
right.
make those assumptions. So I ask my clients to think about talking about the investment instead of
Mm,
the price or the
hmm.
budget, because you're seeding then about the return on investment, and
Mm,
everybody wants to get a return on investment. And then also you can find out about the budget through asking other questions, 3 or 4 questions around it, like, "Tell me about your last
mm,
event." You can
hmm.
tell an awful lot about where they had it. What equipment did you use?
Right,
What was the atmosphere like? And a lot of the time business is lost because maybe you're making indirectly assumptions about this client, or you haven't taken that time to help them step back and really find out what's important for them to achieve from organizing this event. And then that helps you to step away from the budget, or not get involved in negotiations, nitpicking over
mm,
a few hundred, few thousand here and there, because then what it is they want to achieve from it. So when I heard you say you want to help, you
mm,
want us to help you position you as market leaders, then that's going to intake this investment. And that's why I'm recommending this.
right.
I think
Well,
that's the difference.
Kira, thank you so much for all this. I've learned a lot today. And I've also learned that you enjoy foraging and dabbling in gardening and getting involved in the local community. But my listeners need to know that you are also a best-selling author of Steps to Win in the Meetings Market. You work with event, hospitality, and tech companies globally. And her signature Steps to Win program is an accredited sales leadership program that transforms sales results. Kira, how can people find out more about you?
CiaraFeely.com. That's, well, you put it in the notes, but it's F for Frank, EELY. And LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. On my website, I have lots of resources. I have some short 1 and 2 minute videos that you'll get a lot of value from also.
I will attest to the videos. I've spent a lot of time on your YouTube site. There's some great materials there. And thank you once again for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tom. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimpson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimpson.com for more information.